Welcome to Fresh Tech Tips. I am Derrell Noris, CEO of Fresh Tech Solutionz. I have some of my awesome business partners with me today.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Mbaezue-Daniell, and I'm founder of Aegis Project Management, LLC.
And I'm Dr. Doug Franklin, CEO and co-founder of Deck Launch, LLC. How you guys doing today?
Pretty good, man. Out here in Florida, living the life, man.
Yeah, it's mad sunny over there.
Yeah.
So today,
no, go ahead.
So today's Fresh Tech Tip topic is breaking up with clients. This is gonna be a good one. Nick, hey, what's your definition of breaking up with clients?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most people in their lives have gone through breakups. So whenever you get into the point where you have irreconcilable differences with someone, even if they're a client, that's when you break up with them to go your separate ways for the greater good of both of you. So that's pretty much breaking up. And it usually happens because it just hurts too much to stay together. If it hurts, or it's going to cost you too much to stay together. So you might as well go your separate ways.
So I want to kind of get through 3 points today's episode. The first one we're going to talk about is when to break up. Then we're going to talk about the root causes of the conflict. We're going to actually talk about how to break up. And then we're going to talk about keeping the relationship healthy. So really 4 points. So Dr. Doug, let's get into this.
Yes, sir.
When should we break up?
So there's a bunch of reasons, and I think the coolest thing, but kind of the most interesting thing, is that that breakups with your business clients really do kind of line up with some of the things that may happen in real relationships. So one of the things that you can find with regards to just like a root cause of conflict is if there's just terrible communication, right? So like what happens if your vision does not match with your client's vision? We had a really interesting experience with that earlier on in the Deck Launch life cycle, where we had a client that had a pretty good idea, but what ended up happening was that the more we did research, the more we found that their idea was not viable unless they had somewhere around $1.5 million. So most of our clients can start at 30 grand, 40 grand if they wanted to just get off the ground. These guys needed 1 million to try. We told them it wasn't a good idea, and pretty much they told us that we didn't believe in them, even though we gave them a couple of options to pivot their idea. So if in your relationship you're saying two different things, that's when it's time to break up, and so we did.
Yeah, and so that's a great example of conflict of vision, because the visions just weren't aligned. And when your visions aren't aligned, it's hard to do great work. So Nick, let's talk about conflict of scope.
Yeah, we're going to find that these things that kind of relate to each other, because once your visions don't align, then obviously most likely your scope is not going to align, because your scope is pretty much more details about your vision, what it's actually going to take. So let's say just for this instance, let's assume that your visions align, and then you get to the scope. This is the part where you and the client agree to what is exactly that's going to be done. Because if you don't do that, then you can't put a dollar amount on it, which we're going to get to, and that's going to lead to problems later. So your scope is going to be very, very big. Like, hey, what are we actually doing? What are we trying to accomplish? What are you expecting from me? What am I expecting from you? And then let's move on with that. So when you have conflict there, either your client says, oh, no, this is what I wanted to add to this, or I thought you were going to do this. That's where there's an issue, and that could be a big problem and lead to scope creep earlier on. So when you don't define your scope in the beginning, then guess what's going to happen later? Things are just going to keep getting added because nobody knows what was in there. So, but once you define your scope in the beginning, then it's easy to see when things are added on later, and you can attach the proper value to that.
And so let me put my Dr. Doug hat on for a real quick second before we get back into some more of the practical stuff. So what in those first couple of situations, what we're talking about, which is really important to know, is that these are task-based conflict. And so conflict is not bad, but unresolved conflict is bad. So what research tells you is that it's okay to have conflict based on the task itself. Of course you don't want relationship conflict where people just don't like you. But when it comes to the things we're talking about here initially, task-based conflict, talking about the subject at hand, the reason why you've got together with this client. And so it's okay if it's resolved, but it's not okay if it's unresolved. So real, I think we can go to the next section, which is.
So let's talk about breach of contract, because that's a serious red flag and a perfect time to start thinking about breaking up with one of your clients. So there's a couple of examples that we have. We're gonna categorize them into intentional breach of contracts and unintentional breach of contracts. So by unintentional, let's start with the unintentional. We're talking about a client who just actually makes a mistake. So, they don't have bad intentions, but they made a mistake, and the client's trying to blame you for that mistake. It could be an issue. We had an example of this. Actually, we had a church that we were working on their website, and we basically delivered the website, and then their IT guy went in and pretty much changed the whole website, broke some things. I actually had to go in and remove that it was a Fresh Tech Solutions website because I didn't want our name associated with this because we didn't like its changes. And then what happened after that was they expected us to change this back to what we did, and that we just can't do that. We don't like redeveloping work with no cost associated with it. It just didn't make sense for us. So Doug, let's talk about intentional. People who breach the contract intentionally.
So one of the things that they used to always tell us at ExxonMobil when I worked there was that shortcutting was a really bad thing, because that's where you try to get into things that may not necessarily be the right decision for your business, even if it kind of starts to cut costs and things of that nature. So it gets back into what we talked about with ethics last week, where, hey, you have to make sure that you're doing right by your business, by your stakeholders, by everybody, and you have to be kind of aware of what's going on. And so when we talk about intentional breaches, we're talking about the people who are habitual line steppers. They're trying to go ahead and find their way across the line, or just close enough to the line where they can get some type of value in trying to a little bit break the system. So one of our best examples of this is one of our clients that we actually helped go from idea to full out app, and as we were really transparent with the costs, and this client believed that he was going to be able to find cheaper costs for some of the services, and so I'm sure he did a search in other places, but where his search was unethical and violated contracts, legal contracts at that, was by trying to poach one of our own employees. So, you just can't go on our development team and go try to get somebody for hourly services, particularly when it says it in the contract. And that's something that pretty much happened. Not pretty much, it happened, and we had to address it. It was interesting because that conversation reminded me more of a termination for a business, for like an employee, than it did just basically saying split ways, because this was something that was just a complete violation of the partnership, versus just, kind of like the conflict that we were talking about in the other sections. those other places, there might have been a possibility to agree to disagree. But when you get unethical, you got to go. That's just really what it is.
About trust. Yeah, it's about trust. But, contracts exist for a reason because you can't, there's barely any trust in business. So once that trust is there, whether it's unintentional or it's intentional, once that trust is breached, the only difference between the two is going into it with malicious intent, your intention. So the first person who goes in there is, okay, you messed something up. Is how do you react to it? Are you going to be like, oh man, I messed up, let me come clean and let them know and we can come up to an agreement? Or do we just try to unethically blame something on somebody who wasn't there and call them in the middle of the night and blame them for stealing passwords and messing things up or whatever it might be, hypothetically, of course. But or are we or are we gonna just fess up and just be like, okay, something messed up is a problem, let's deal with it openly and move on.
And one of the things that I do want to say is, like, we're not saying that our clients were the only people guilty. And the same thing for you is, like, you might end up being the guilty party at some point. We've definitely made some mistakes, especially with the amount of time we think a project's going to take, the amount of money it's going to take, miscommunications, where we've been dumped before too. And so that's right. It's just one of those things that you can learn moving forward. I think the guys will agree with me. Is first, be ethical, because we're really serious about that, and then second and third, figure out basically with communication and other things. So I guess this allows us to transition into basically root causes of how did you get here, right? Like, how did everything blow up?
Root causes.
I guess we could talk about.
Let's get on these root causes of the conflict. Why is there conflict? I think the number one reason is improper screening. You can't try to turn a nickel into a dime. Some clients don't need to be your clients. And I could really go on with 500 analogies, but the doctor said I have to be good on the Facebook Live. So I'm trying to maintain my analogies right now. But we like housewife clients. I can say that.
Oh,
Nick,
no.
save me and take it away.
He was clean.
So pretty much, and most of these things that we're all talking about here, and what Doug mentioned it a little bit in the last part, the reason why this is important is because project success, we bring it down to project success most times relies on the fact that, okay, you have people doing these projects, and people are going to do people stuff. So one of the ways to avoid people stuff from happening or reduce people stuff from happening is trying to see in the beginning, hey, okay, evaluate honestly, this person might be super talented, or this business or this client, the idea might be great, but maybe the personality is not a match. This is going to cause issues with this team member that I have who I know is going to be a conflict. The money might look good, project might look good, but if you just honest with yourself, you say, okay, we can't do this. It just can't happen. And then at that point, you can figure something out. But if you just have blinders on because the money is good or the project is good and you really want to use, we're just going to fix it later, the cost of fixing stuff or the probability of failure is just so high that it's not worth it in the beginning. So really just being honest with yourself at that intake process in the beginning during that screening helps you save a lot of heartache later.
And screening is really hard. So even though we're telling you to interview your clients, it goes back to kind of what we talked about a little bit last week, but also reality is man, if your pockets are light and you're looking at your business oh my gosh, I need a little bit of cash in my pocket to make sure that everything is going okay. Sometimes you make decisions like that where you're going to try to get somebody who may not be the right person for you. And,
that's an excellent point, Doug, because we're victims of that. we do that, or not now, but back when we first started, we were hungry for clients, and so we might have had a decision to make and sign on a client that didn't pass the pre-screening process, but the problem with that is, yes, we got the money, but now we have a headache, and we're always right about it. It always comes back. If we have a bad feeling and we still take them on, then we're gonna feel it, and it's probably gonna be more costly in the long run. So
Derrell and Doug are just great at this. I mean, we all are good at this, but like they always have this gut feeling when there's a client or somebody about a situation, like, let's not do this. Me, I'm always more likely to, like, okay, let's analyze the risk and we can handle it. I always feel like I can manage this. They're like, no.
I don't even like to say I told you so anymore. I don't even say I told you so. No. I just look at you.
I can hear his voice. I told you no. So really, we've switched because projects, not just the headache and the time that it takes and lost resources, but probability of failure. That's probably the thing that gets me, because those clients are always the hardest. You can't satisfy them. So there's no what is successful, but you can't succeed at that, and both of you end up unhappy. So why do it? In the first place, it just doesn't work.
And there's levels to this, right? And so we talk about like, what are some of the other things that come out of having specific clients like that. So what we found is those clients that we screen a little bit better, that we understand how they are, where they're not trying to stretch us for additional money. When it comes to us being able to give them recommendations to where they can go find funding, where they can get investments, how they can join accelerators, they pretty much go ahead and take that initiative by themselves. And so, like, basically when people are showing you who they are for these certain things up here, whether we're talking about cost or conflict, is going to show you what it means for them on the long run. So, like, for us, as we're a tech company, we're a consulting company. If people ask us, well, how long did it take this person to raise money? How long did this business continue to survive in the current technological environment? Have these people won awards? We are, by protecting ourselves, even though we could make a little bit more money by protecting ourselves from some of those clients that should not be in our wheelhouse, we end up benefiting ourselves as well. And so it's kind of one of those things. Do you want your money on the front end, or do you want your money on the back end for looking reliable? So you can buy as much, you can get as many clients as you want, but don't you want clients to come to you because you're quality? That's really where you want to be at.
Love it. And so another root cause of conflict is clients not believing a client is, if that makes sense.
And Doug kind of just touched on it a little bit. So you do the screening. Let's say you get past that point, or even if they're not related, eventually everybody's on their best behavior. We take it back to the relationship thing. Everybody's on their best behavior during the honeymoon phase at the beginning, but soon after, true personalities are going to start showing. Like, certain things at first bump, they're going to show you a few things about the way they handle things. So at that point, again, being honest and open with the communication with them, but also with yourself, and say, okay, I'm not going to deal with that, or that's going to be a problem, and just filing that away for later, either where you have to resolve that, or you have to eventually break up with them, or just knowing that that's something that you need to deal with. So believing what the client is showing you as who they are, and not being oblivious to, or turning a blind eye to it.
Okay, so
we have a little. We actually can we extend this, because we have a little bit. We actually still have. We can ride out one of our examples from this. It's pretty much so, like Dennis Green told you when he said we are who we thought they were. That's really what you should do in a lot of times. And so our greatest example for this, for the unethical individual, was the fact that he had the opportunity, or his business had the opportunity, to be part of an internship program where we would have students working in his target market on his project. And because it was part of a really cool program, it was free. But for some reason or another, he always had problems paying for the additional materials that would have allowed us to be able to do more cool things with this concept. And so that should have been a red flag to us all to begin with, that like, if you have kids working on an internship that technically, if it wasn't part of credit for the school, they should have never been working on it for anything less than maybe $1,000 to $1,500 a month, then of course he's going to try to go ahead and poach your employees. That just shows you because the cost for poaching the employees is much less.
Absolutely right. So let's hop in. I just want to touch on one more root cause, boundaries, because I take boundaries very seriously, and that's something that can be a cause of a breakup. So knowing those boundaries and setting those expectations, it's very crucial. So they should be understood and explained and agreed to before the relationship starts. So now let's talk about actually breaking up. It's not you, it's me.
the age-old lie, right? It's always them. It's always them. It's a lie. I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, so all the things that we're talking about, and I love that Doug said it goes both ways as well. So this also could have been called breaking up with a business or service provider. It's the same thing when we're working with people. So it can be used. Is tracking the issue. So, when we talk a lot about screening, try to identify what the problem is, and then you have to keep it in mind and track it so that it doesn't go out of control. And if you're tracking it, then you'll be able to see a point where it's like, okay, let's openly communicate. We've been communicating this whole time. We can see that we've been having this recurrent issue this whole time. I think it's time for us to, maybe part ways. And that's going to be more easily accepted than if you're not communicating everything. The person thinks it's fine, and you just come out of nowhere and just be like, that's it. I know. I didn't want to go into that, but that's how a whole new relationship happens, and because you weren't communicating the whole way. So those things go hand in hand for me.
Right. No, definitely. So that you having a transition plan, making good on promises. I love how Nick said do it in person or over the phone, respectfully.
Right.
Nobody wants to get broken up with text message or email. So just keep in mind.
Not burning bridges, man.
Don't burn bridges. Keep records. Keep documentation.
This is also part of your branding, of the feel that you're giving your customers. You're gonna have to split ways with customers too. So you still want to give them that respect, that is emblematic of your service or who you are, or whatever your customer experience is. So that part is also, even though it's a difficult part, it's also part of it. Some people will be very happy that we had to let me go, and they helped me transition, they helped me find the next person, helped me put in a good position. They actually still cared about me. They didn't just drop me like a rock, So that matters.
Yeah, it definitely matters.
Yeah,
it definitely matters. I'm friends with some of my exes, so you have to keep that relationship healthy. Nobody wants drama. Nobody wants drama.
Ex-clients, right? That's ex-clients, right?
Yeah. Yes, ex-clients, exactly, ex-clients.
Right.
So let's talk about keeping the relationship healthy and try to avoid all this breakup talk. So there's a couple of points we want to run through. We want to set clear expectations in the beginning. We keep on saying it over and over again because it's the most important thing that we're saying to y'all. Set expectations in the beginning of all of your relationships, business and personal. So we're gonna do that. We want to over communicate. Let everybody know everything. When we bring in a client, we try to put everything on the table so there's no surprises. And we already talked about strict boundaries. And Nick, let's talk about not giving away value.
Yeah, I think that goes with the boundaries. So, and because we can either look at it from a behavior standpoint, or we can look at it from also the scope. So when we've already defined, hey, this is what our relationship is, this is what we're doing, this is what the scope is, then it's easier for you to say, okay, if I do this, this is what this value is, and I need to be compensated for it. But if that's not defined, then you're gonna be giving away. People are gonna be reaching, they're gonna be grabbing stuff. You're not gonna be able to tell them no because you didn't tell them they couldn't in the beginning. So why are you telling me no now? So not giving away value can only be possible if you've already defined what the scope is and what your behavior is going to be, what comes with your service, all that stuff.
It's kind of funny because it's one of those things that we talk about that your friends tell you, the things that you probably heard on your TV shows like Insecure and so forth. When they talk about relationships, they talk about know your worth, right? And so that's one of the things you always have to do. It's a real thing, and so that means when you have when you provide the expectations of a scope of work at the beginning, if someone is asking for those add-ons at the end, you don't have to say yes. It feels uncomfortable because we've been told the customer is always right, but that's not necessarily the case. The customer is always right because they're telling you what they need, but they also need to pay the cost. It comes from a really cool relationship that we have with one of our new clients, where Nicholas and I were on the phone and we were like, well, we think this is going to cost a couple of extra bucks, but we'll cover it. And she said, no, you're crazy. Send me the invoice. And we were like, what? And she was like, well, I need you guys to work with me for the long run. I know I need you, so there's no way that I'm going to, her words, betray your trust, and I want to pay the cost. So that's really all it is. It's like money is not everything in these relationships, but it is definitely something when you're putting out more effort.
And a final point. Our final point is once you have a good client like that, show them that you value, show them that they're valued. Just keep touch points with them. Treat them the same way that you did in the beginning to get them, and that should help.
Definitely. So, man, I want to thank you guys for joining. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. We are here every Monday, normally at 12 o'clock on Facebook Live. So please join the Facebook group, Fresh Tech Tips. That's tips with the Z, of course. And do not be afraid to break up with clients. It is okay to break up. Life will go on. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining Fresh Tech Tips.